Hey, welcome everyone. Season 2, episode 15. Joe's Hot Takes 25. Today, welcome to Tipland. We're going to talk about gratuity. This is kind of becoming a hot take. Hearing a lot about it. All right. You know what I'm talking about. So here we are. We're going to ask questions. We're going to provoke those thoughts, do some research, give you something to chew on today. All right. I believe in open, respectful conversations and interactions. Last couple weeks, we did respect. Let's keep that tone going. So whether you agree or disagree, your opinion does matter. I want to hear it. So now I try really hard to leave my opinions out of the podcast. I know y'all can read between the lines, right? And you can figure out where I'm coming from. You usually know exactly where I'm coming from or where I'm headed. But still, I do my best to just present the facts, cover kind of both sides as best as possible. Leave it open so that you can decide, right? Decide on your own. Decide through your own research. Check up on me and open up these conversations. Yeah? All right. So, again, I try to leave it out. So, here we go. Let's cover this hot take on tipping and gratuity. Wow. So, back in my younger days, tipping was kind of simple, right? I think generally 10% was a good tip, 15% if you had really good service. That was kind of the way things were back, probably in the late 60s, 70s, right? So 10 to 15%. If the service was terrible, you left a penny. And it was kind of disrespectful, but it was because you wanted to let that server know, I left you a penny because your service was terrible for whatever reason. Now, I get it. Some people are having a bad day, and I understand. Sometimes it's hard to keep that smile on, even though we're having a really bad day. But anyway, if somebody really knocked it out of the park, they did a great job back in the day, you left a 15% tip, and then you went one extra step, and you wrote a little thank you on their note, just to let them know, hey, thank you. And that's, that's cool, right? And that was, 70s, maybe into the 80s. I don't know. Now, here's the deal. You buy a muffin, right? I want to order a muffin, and they have a little thing, a little tablet there, and they spin it around, right? And it's a little iPad or tablet, and they ask you if you want to leave a tip, 25% generally, before they even hand you a muffin. And so suddenly, if I push no tip, after I've grabbed my own coffee, my own napkins, my own lid, basically did everything short of clocking in for the shift. But if I push no tip, I'm the villain. I'm the bad guy. I'm the apple. Say apple, owl, right? What's driving this? What makes us feel like what's changed, right? First of all, you've all seen it. The tip comes to you now, and they're sitting at 20% is the bottom. 20%, you're a cheapskate. 25% is now, I think, at least what most servers expect. That's what I see. It's usually sitting on the 25%. And then there's even a 30%. 30% tip for what? Come on. Now, in a lot of these places, people are making better money than they used to make too. So, all right. Let's stay on track. Why are tips everywhere now, right? And what are we tipping for? And who actually gets the money? So, and are servers still making below minimum wage like they used to? Because if they're barely scraping by, that's one conversation. But if they're making full wages plus now untaxed tips, that's a different conversation entirely. And then there's the bigger question. Why do we only tip certain jobs? Why servers but not trash collectors? Why bartenders, but not mail carriers? Why Uber drivers, but not the guy fixing the power lines in August when it's 112 degrees? We don't tip that guy. And what about police and firefighters? Do they take gratuities? Spoiler alert, I was a cop. If your local cop starts accepting tips, we got bigger issues than just good old-fashioned restaurant math. So, excuse me, still struggling the cough. So, friends, today let's take a little trip to Tipland. All right? Like most road trips, this one may get uncomfortable, but hopefully it'll be interesting, right? So, old rules of tipping. All right, so back in 1970s America, tipping had structure. There were rules. They were unwritten rules, but rules nonetheless. At restaurants and diners, 10 to 12% was considered perfectly acceptable for normal service. 15%, that was exceptional service territory, and that was the ceiling. If you don't believe me, look this up, all right? This was what was happening back in the day. 10 to 12%. All right. So bars are usually $1 a drink, or maybe 10% to 15% of the tab. Hotels, bellhops got $1 or $2 per bag. Housekeeping may get $1 or $2 per day. That was the way things were. Hairdressers, they got a 10 to 15% tip. Same with taxi drivers. Simple, predictable, understandable, right? We can all get around that. Somebody does a nice job, you give them a 10, 15% tip. If I go out and spend $100, a 10% tip is $10. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good tip. Now they're asking for 25 to 30%. On $100, you're talking another $25 to $30. So your bill went from $100 to, at a 10% tip, $110. At a 25% tip, $125. At a 30, $130. That's ridiculous. Okay. All right. So back in the day, right? Simple, predictable, and like I said, understandable. Here's what's important. Back then, tipping was tied to hospitality service, right? So sit-down meals, bars, travel, things like that. Somebody's actually doing something for you directly. Nobody was asking for tips at a drive-thru. Nobody flipped around a tablet at a frozen yogurt shop expecting 30% because they handed you the spoon, but you had to go fill up all your ice cream on your own, right? The entire culture around tipping was smaller and more localized. Now, today, everybody's looking for a tip. You buy a bottle of water at an airport kiosk, and suddenly the machine asks, would you like to leave 20, 25, 30, 35% tip? For what? I have to go over, get the drink. I have to carry it over there. All the cashier's doing is pushing a button, and I'm going to ring my card up myself. So what's the tip for? Excuse me. I don't know, because you scanned the barcode? No. And look, this didn't just happen overnight. This has been happening. It's been building up. And part of the reason tipping expanded is because of something called the tip credit system. So Congress expanded labor laws in the 1960s and 70s that allowed employers to pay tipped workers below minimum wage because tips were expected to make up the difference, right? So you might have made $3.50 an hour, and minimum wage was maybe, say, $5.75 an hour. So you're a little below, but hopefully those tips will level it out or even make it an increase for you. That was the idea. Now, that became the justification for America's tipping culture. And a lot of places, a lot of countries don't tip, but America, we do. Now, restaurants said, hey, we can pay our employees less because the customers will handle the rest. And customers accepted it because, honestly, most people, including myself, felt empathy for servers working so hard for below minimum wage. And to be fair, for a long time, that was absolutely true. That was the way it was, right? And so you don't feel bad giving somebody a tip for, excuse me, providing you a direct service. All right. So now, let's move. Excuse me, folks. Let's move forward. In the early 2000s, my son worked as a server, right? So he actually worked a couple different serving type jobs. And I saw firsthand how hard people work in that industry. And at the time, minimum wage was hovering around about $5.50 an hour. Servers were making between $3 and $3.50 an hour before tips. So if the customers didn't tip, you got crushed financially. And servers were they weren't keeping all those tips. Remember, they had to tip out. So if you were at, like, I know my son worked at Outback. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Worked at Outback, and you had to tip out your bartenders, the bussers, sometimes even kitchen staff. Everybody was hustling for that money and getting and hustling the server. So personally, at that point back in the 2000s, I was like, you know what? 20% is my number. I'm going to start tipping 20%. Now, that wasn't because somebody on an iPad guilted me into it, but because I understood the economics behind it. And I understood servers were really depending on those tips to survive. And honestly, most of us were fine, I know I was, with that arrangement because we believed we were helping working people bridge the gap. And there's nothing wrong with that. But now comes the important question of what has changed? Has that system changed? And if so, how did that system change? Because maybe our habits need to change as well. So let's look at the modern wage reality. So let's research it. Today, by law, no server in America can legally make less than minimum wage overall. Now, how that happens depends entirely on the state. There are basically two systems here. System number one is the tip credit states. This is still the most common setup. So under federal law, employers can pay tipped workers as little as $2.13 an hour, as long as the tips bring them up to at least the federal minimum wage. That federal tipped wage still exists in around 15 states: Texas, Indiana, North Carolina, several others. But here's the key detail that a lot of people miss. If tips plus wages do not equal minimum wage, then the employer has to make up the difference. So regardless, the server will earn at least minimum wage. Now, there are other states that have higher tipped minimums. Now, Florida pays tipped workers nearly $11 an hour before tips. Arizona, around $12.15 an hour. So a server can make $12.15 an hour before tips. Now, let's start talking about it. Nobody's tipping 10, 15% anymore. Tips now are 20, 25, 30%. Ooh. So let's pause there for a second. Excuse me. Because this is where things are getting a little more interesting. So we have the system number two, which is called the equal wage states. 7 states eliminated the sub-minimum wage tip law. Those states are California, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Montana, Alaska, Minnesota. In those states, servers receive full minimum wage before tips are even entered into the picture. So California servers make, are you ready for this? $16.90 an hour plus tips. Washington is over $17. Excuse me, over $17 an hour plus tips. So in those states, tips are no longer making up the wage gap. That is pure bonus income on top of a competitive hourly salary or wage. And that changes the psychology of tipping dramatically, because now customers are still socially being pressured into 20, 25, 30% tips, right? While servers are already earning significantly more than many non-tipped workers. And those are workers who never get tips. And that's where this conversation starts rubbing people the wrong way. Because the new no tax on tips law, which I'm not opposed to, right? But here we go. Well, first of all, I'm opposed to all income tax. It needs to be reformed. Excuse me. Now, all right, tip land. We're going to take a hard left-hand turn here. You ready? Starting with the 2026 tax year, tipped workers received a major new federal tax break under the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Catchy, right? Under this law, and for all of you that are wondering where it came from, this is a Trump law. Under this law, many tipped workers can deduct up to $25,000 in tip income from federal income taxes. $25,000 a year. So if you're already making $16, $17 an hour, you can still earn another $25,000 on top of that without having to pay taxes. Wow. Now, that doesn't mean that tips become invisible. So servers still have to report on their tips. In fact, reporting rules are becoming a little more strict. Cash and credit card tips over $20 still have to be reported monthly. The IRS now requires detailed tracking codes on W-2 forms specifically for tipped occupations. So reporting remains mandatory. But federally, many servers may now pay zero federal income tax on a huge chunk of their tips. Now, they'll still pay Social Security and Medicare on that. And state taxes may still apply depending on where they live. But federally, that's a substantial break. And remember, in equal wage states, these workers are already making $16, $17 an hour before tips. So now customers are expected to tip 25% on top of an already high menu price for workers potentially earning solid wages and getting affordable, favorable tax breaks, right? So you can see why some people are starting to ask questions. Now, I've had some people say, I've stopped tipping. I'll tip a few dollars or whatever, but I'm kind of backing off on the tipping. And I had to take a hard look at that myself. And I'm feeling like, yeah, why do I need to pay? Why do I need to tip based on the amount of the dollar amount? I should be tipping based on the service and time. So if I'm in a restaurant for an hour, but I have a $150 meal with maybe my wife and I have a $150 bill, do I need to pay 20% on top of that? Or would it be cool to just drop like 10 or 15 bucks to that server? Now, if they're already making $10 an hour and I drop another 10 to 15, they're now making somewhere between $20 and $25 an hour. I think that's fair, but I don't know about, do I need to leave a $40, $50 tip? Okay. So let's do some uncomfortable math, all right? And listen, I know some people are going to hate this part, but math doesn't care about feelings. Math does not care. So here we go. We're going to breakfast. We're going to go to our favorite little diner. All right. You order a $12 breakfast. That's bacon, eggs, toast, coffee. Server refills your coffee a few times, brings the food, maybe checks on you once or twice, right? You're there for 45 minutes. You leave a 20% tip. That's about $2.40. Now, if that server handles 4 tables during that same period, that's roughly $9.60 in tips under an hour. And if you're in Arizona tipped wage is $12.15 an hour. Now, that server is grossing around $21 to $22 an hour. Again, for dinner, breakfast service, or diner breakfast service, right? Just for a diner. All right. Now, I know some of that gets tipped out to the cooks or bus staff or whatever. But let's be honest here. It's not a terrible amount of money for a position requiring minimal formal education and relatively low entry barriers, right? Harsh? Maybe. But again, facts are facts, right? You don't need a degree or an education to be a server. I'm not putting them down. I'm not putting servers down. It's good, hard work. But it's not a professional level career, okay? Now, so dinner is where it gets really wild. Let's scale this up. Same server, different meal. You go out for dinner, steak, potato, veggies, bread, glass of wine, cup of coffee afterwards. Very easily to hit $30 at a casual restaurant. Let's throw a 20% tip on there. That's another $6. Now, let's be real. Most restaurants even use tabletop payment devices now where you take care of everything yourself. Half the time the server doesn't even bring the bill anymore. The machine does everything. But somehow the expected tip percentage keeps climbing. So now your server gets $12.15 an hour if they're in Arizona, okay? Plus a $6 tip. If they do this from multiple tables, which they are, let's just say they're handling 4 tables right there for that hour. Now they're taking in over $70 an hour during a busy period. That's for 4 tables. They're taking in $70 an hour. Again, before somebody yells at me, I understand not every shift is packed. I understand that slow days exist. I understand that tip sharing exists. But we also have to acknowledge the reality. Some servers in busy restaurants are making very serious money. And then comes the moment that drives everybody insane. The kiosk spins around and the suggested tip starts now. Not at 10, not at 15, not at 20. Now it starts at 25%, 30 and 35%. 35%. That's right. Look at it next time they spin that thing around and see what it says. And it's usually sitting on either 25 or 30. At what point does this stop becoming a gratuity and start becoming an emotional type of extortion, right? For a family of 4, spending $100, that's another $25 just in tip. Now that's an entire meal just vanished into the payment screen because society decided saying no is now rude. So, should tipping be based on time? You know, should we look at it and say, how much time are we spending in here? So here's the real hot take. Maybe tipping should be based solely on the bill. Maybe tipping based solely on the bill of sale is no longer the right way to do it. No longer makes sense. It no longer makes sense. Maybe service should be tied to time and effort instead of food prices. Think about it. If I order a $15 burger or a $60 steak, did the server really do 4 times the labor to bring it to me? Right? 15, 30, 45, 60, that's 4 times. So how does that, the $15 or the $60, right? I go out, I get the burger or I get the steak. How? I don't understand. Do I tip 25% on $60 because they did more? Because they brought me a steak? No. Their work didn't change. The time didn't change. Nothing changed. Just the type of meal and the dollar amount of that meal changed. Did the kitchen do more work? Not necessarily. Yeah, the restaurant bought more expensive ingredients, but they also charged more for that. So the restaurant did okay. But the server's physical effort may have barely changed. Bring in a burger, bring in a steak, doesn't matter. Historically, American tipping has always been percentage based, and that was the standard. But some people argue for a time based model instead, kind of like paying for a mechanic or a consultant. For example, $10 to $15 per hour of table service. And honestly, there's arguments both ways. A lot of people like the current system because it's simple. Everybody understands percentages. Fine dining usually does require higher end service skills. I get it. Wine acknowledgement, knowledge, timing, presentation. Fair. I get it. Maybe you tip more at a high end restaurant. But the current system creates a huge income gap. A breakfast server that's hustling nonstop, right, might make less than a fine dining server opening one expensive bottle of wine. That breakfast server's running how many meals that morning to tally up to a $120 bottle of wine. And then that server on that fine dining restaurant's going to get tipped very handsomely, not only on the bottle of wine, but on the rest of that meal. Think that through. Meanwhile, the breakfast server, right, they're sweating bullets. They're refilling coffee for 6 tables, and they're working their buns off. So now the time-based system tries to solve that. If somebody camps at your table for 4 hours, sipping one iced tea, and destroying your server's, section all night, well, maybe the server deserves compensation for that lost opportunity. I understand that. That makes sense. But time-based tipping also creates another little problem, is it rewards slow service the same, right? Because now people are going to say, well, if I can turn a table in 30 minutes, I need to slow down and turn that table every hour so I can get a full hour tip out of it. I don't know if that's true. I think that servers generally want to turn those tables. Keep turning them, because you never know. The next guy might tip a little more, right? So the faster, more efficient they are, maybe they make less. But I just feel like something's off on where we're tipping today. I feel like it's just gone way out of control. But I don't know. What about everybody else? Let's widen this conversation. Why do we tip some professionals but not others? Why not the trash collectors? They work hard. Mail carriers, utility crews, somebody restoring power. Excuse me. During like an Oklahoma ice storm, probably worked harder that day than anybody carrying fajitas to table 7. But we don't tip them. Why? Well, generally because those jobs already come with structured wages and benefits, especially government workers. And that brings us back to police and fire. No, they generally should not, no, do not accept gratuities. Police and fire should not ever accept a gratuity, not even a free cup of coffee. Don't do it. Once law enforcement starts taking gifts and favors, things get ugly fast, right? It creates conflicts of interest. It gives the appearance of corruption. It makes questions about favoritism. Oh, the cops are always going to that diner because he gives them free coffee. That's not a good look, because when that diner gets robbed, that guy's like, where were you guys at? I give you free coffee all the time, and you weren't even here to prevent this robbery at my diner. Okay? Cops, fire, do not take gratuities. Don't do it. Most departments do have heavily restricted guidelines and pretty much outright ban gratuities. I know that the 2 departments that I worked for, definitely gratuities were not acceptable. And that makes sense. All right. So tips really, folks, belong in hospitality service. Like I said, where the customer experience directly impacts the compensation. But maybe we've expanded the tipping culture so far that people started feeling manipulated instead of appreciated. And that's the tension sitting underneath all of this, right? All right. Well, there it is. There's the hot take. I've stirred it up. and served it on a messy platter. So now you tell me what you think. Should we continue tipping the old-fashioned way and just run those percentages, no matter what, based off of how much the bill is? Or is it time to rethink how we say thank you to wait staff? And before everybody lights me up with negative comments, remember, this is not about attacking servers, not at all. It's about asking whether the system still makes sense in 2026. That's the conversation. That's all I've got for today. So I'm going to leave you with this. Stay curious. I always say that. Ask questions. I always say that. Fact check everything. Fact check me. It's important so that you can know exactly what you're talking about when you do have that open conversation. And above all, everyone, please, I can't ask you enough. Please be kind. Be kind. Have productive, respectful conversations. Hear both sides and then make your decisions. Okay? Until next time, be well.